Have you ever thought about how Q as a letter is too avant-garde to be so early in the alphabet?
The letter Q comes up way too early in the alphabet.
How do you mean?
Well, it should be all the way in the back with the fellow avant-garde letters, the X, the Y, the C. Q didn't ask to go early.
Then let me introduce you to Julio Torres, filmmaker, comedian, and overall lover of shapes. Welcome to Magenta Cinema. My name is Jen, and today I'm going to be talking about Julio Torres' work and how he uses comedy to explore even the most obscure thoughts with his surrealist and whimsical style. But before I dive into his work, let me give you a brief introduction. Julio Torres grew up in El Salvador, and in his early years, he grew up in an apartment above his mother's clothing store. His father was a civil engineer, and to this day, he continues to work with his family on various creative projects in his life. His 2019 special, My Favorite Shapes, in which his mother and sister helped with the amazing set design, to his mother still helping him create his wardrobe from scratch, even long distance. Growing up, he had a love for toys as well as visual design, and he was also influenced from his mother's love of Brazilian telenovelas.
Brazilian telenovelas are moody and terrifying and sexy and
and
wait.
obsessed with death.
Obsessed with death, which I feel like some of that seeped into Los Espookys.
Yes.
And like, probably like a lot of the things that I do, because my mom used to watch these. There's the one where throughout the season, there was this man who, when it was night, he would just start shaking and crying, and he lived in a basement, and he just couldn't leave the basement at night. And then it turns out that he was in love with the moon. And in the finale, you see him floating up to the moon. Like his family chains him down, so he's like a kite in the night.
He ultimately decided to come to New York to study at the New School, as well as to pursue stand-up and writing. He got various writing jobs from there, and in 2016, he actually landed a writing position for SNL. But even though I had unknowingly loved Torres' work on sketches such as Papyrus, A Well for Boys,
Some kids like to play, others just sort of wait for adulthood.
and The Actress, my first real introduction to Torres was the show Los Espookys, and I think that is a fantastic place to start. Los Espookys first aired in 2019, and Fred Armisen is co-showrunner along with Julio Torres. Torres also is co-writer for the show along with Ana Fabrega, and both Ana and him are also starring in the show as Andres and Tati. The show follows a group of friends who love horror and take on these odd jobs, mostly tricking people, doing things like faking an exorcism or faking a sea monster for tourism. This all happens after one of the main characters, Ronaldo, had thrown a horror-themed quince for his sister, and his uncle, played by Fred Armisen, encourages him to pursue this as a career. The show dips into the surreal, especially with Julio's character, Andres, and Andres is a character who is from a chocolatier fortune, but has a mysterious past.
Me encontraron de bebé en medio de una tormenta eléctrica al pie del orfanato.
Sí, muy bueno.
Cuando las monjas me vieron, dijeron, este niño no es como los otros, es diferente. Cuando el padre Francisco me entregó a mi familia, dijo, cuidado con este niño. Hay algo misterioso dentro de él, algo oscuro. Me encontraron de bebé en medio de...
Sí, ya sé.
Except not really. It definitely dips into the surreal with things like his inner water demon that lives inside of him, and they communicate back and forth quite a lot.
¿La película?
I believe that's why he has the blue hair, naturally, as well as him asking for personal favors from the moon. Another plotline follows a TV reporter from this news channel that slowly starts to realize that she has been brainwashed and she's someone who had another life entirely. I love that one of the ways that he can explore these surrealist themes, but while keeping it grounded in reality, is to keep the reality of the language. Torres has said himself that having these characters actually speak their native languages and switching back and forth between English and Spanish, that can really add to the believability and the authenticity of a show, even when you are going out of the realm of reality and showing things in a more magical, mystical way. This doesn't even begin to cover how much I love this show. I just love all the characters in it so much, and how much of a vibrant world that they're able to create, even with the pretense of a group of characters that love horror. I just can't imagine the show without, obviously, Julio and Anna's influence, especially in characters like Tati or the water demon.
Horas, le dije a mi novio que nos juntábamos en 20 minutos.
Tati, no manches, les mandé un correo a todos explicándoles cómo va a estar la movida y de hecho tú fuiste la única que respondió recibido, gracias.
Sí, lo recibí, pero no lo leí, me hubieras dicho.
They're just so fun, and that's what makes the show so unique and why I love it. In 2019, he also released his first comedy special, My Favorite Shapes, on HBO.
I've often been called too niche, to which I'll say, I have no idea what you could possibly be talking about.
In this special, he uses visual elements, especially shapes on a conveyor belt, to talk about his past and also to dissect very specific things in life that people relate to.
I have begun to fear that this new cactus knows that seconds before it arrived into my apartment, I, with my bare hands, excavated the corpse of his predecessor, threw it out, wiped the vessel clean, and said, "Oh look, a new home for you." I feel like I have been here before.
No puedo explicar por qué, pero siento que esta piel no es mía. Me siento como un extraño en mi propio cuerpo.
You can tell that he really perfected his performance down to every detail, especially the visual elements, which were so carefully designed by not only him, but his mother and sister. After that, he continued to work on Los Espookys, as well as release his debut film, Problemista, starring him and Tilda Swinton. In it, Torres plays Alejandro, who is an aspiring toy designer from El Salvador, who has come to New York pursuing his dream of working for Hasbro. In the meantime, he's working for a company that helps cryogenically freeze artists to help preserve them as well as preserve their work. While working there, he's assigned to this artist named Bobby, and he meets Bobby's wife, Elizabeth. Since Alejandro does get fired from this job, he does decide to work with Elizabeth to try and create a showcase for Bobby and sell his work, and in return she promises to sponsor him. Their dysfunctional relationship is held together by Alejandro's patience as well as their shared desperation to reach their goals.
I feel bad for her, but like, yikes. Should she be making this any harder on herself?
Well, I have. I've been on for days talking to your company. It's no surprise to me.
I don't think she's a nightmare.
Once again in this, Torres is seamlessly able to blend a world based in reality and bureaucracy with these fantastical elements, such as personifying Craigslist as this shady entity that you can literally get tangled up with, or the representation of the seemingly endless maze of paperwork that it takes to get a visa in this country. So overall, if you're a fan of films like Sorry to Bother You or They Clone Tyrone, for their mix of reality and surreality, you should definitely check out Problemistas. And now to his most recent show, Fantasmas. So this show seems to encapsulate his style the most overall, and it also feels very personal to him, especially because he has used a lot of the bits that he has kind of like built up over the years. The show is once again a gloriously surreal comedy. The show mostly follows Julio as he mostly puts off trying to get the proof of existence by trying to find his oyster earring that he had lost. And the show's also held together by these amazing comedic vignettes that go in and out of the story. So this starts with Julio explaining a bit about who he is and what he does. And this is the perfect insight into the character at the beginning. Otherworldly, odd, but in a way that many people can still connect to and relate to, even if they couldn't verbalize it.
I mean, you know, I wake up and I just sort of Julio.
It's amazing. Just today he was consulting for Crayola, and tomorrow he's meeting with NASA to rebrand a constellation.
I can feel the inner lives of shapes and colors and sounds and numbers and letters. I started doing letters recently.
Taking a silly idea seriously, like Julio's love for the clear iridescence of Cinderella's slipper and what that can represent.
It's because I was tossing and turning all night thinking about how you need to make a clear crayon.
But clear isn't a color.
If it isn't a color, what do you call this?
What do you call what?
The space between us. The emotional space, I mean.
I think it connects to us as an audience because it's authentic to Torres, and you can tell. Every episode of the show has some big stars that you'll recognize, from Emma Stone to Paul Dano to Z-Way to even Tilda Swinton in a toilet.
I am the water. I am here, but also there. I am.
So some of the themes are definitely similar to the issues in Problemista of having to battle against this bureaucracy in the United States. Torres balances the harsh reality of some of these topics by using fantastic elements and magical realism to really punctuate these moments in a way that makes you really feel the moment for what it is, instead of exactly what may be happening in reality.
Thingy.
How do I get one?
What do you mean? They just give it to you. You just go to the app and then you put in your social and your credit score and...
I don't have that.
Don't have what?
Any of that.
What kind of stuff did you make?
I made the dress.
No, you mean to say I made a dress.
No. I can show you. See?
We see these recurring themes of his inner thoughts being like a stage, as well as exploring things like customer service in a way that is completely broken from reality.
Why?
The rule.
They state I can cancel within 24 hours.
You bought it through a third-party site.
That says I should call you.
This, again, is another super fun show, and it's only 6 episodes, so I highly recommend going on a binge of it. It's very quick. So what I love about Torres's writing is that you can fully see it from his point of view, and you can tell that it's not manufactured in a way to just make it as appealing to as many people as possible. He can portray the absurdity that can come in the most mundane and boring parts of our day-to-day life. He breaks down parts that would usually be the boring part of a story and blows them into these epic proportions. I really love this quote he had in a Q&A where he's basically describing, how much surrealism can be useful for portraying real parts of our life.
Surreality is all about, right? It's not about making things just for the sake of them being weird. It's not just to make a cookie costume because it's weird. It's about emotionally translating something that can't be articulated any other way. And I think that when you have one of those things, you just have to say it out loud. And then you'll see that is actually echoed with with other people.
I really believe that is the key to why I love his storytelling and why I find it so compelling, because he's expressing the world in the way that we feel it to be. And when you're expressing it in that way, things are often absurd. It really brings people into the situation so that even if you cannot personally relate, you can really visualize and feel what Torres is conveying. I have one more quote from Torres just about his work in general and not being so worried about being confined to labels. He says, "I didn't go to film school. I didn't go to writing school. When I started doing stand-up, there were people who were like, well, that's not stand-up. Then I started writing sketch comedy, and it felt like people thought, well, that's not sketch comedy. Then making Problemista, that felt a little unclassifiable too, and it really was a head scratcher for a lot of people. Same with my new show Fantasmas, and I'm learning how to embrace that discomfort as opposed to conforming to it. I have an appreciation for more conventional work, but that's just not my path." I know I personally can get too caught up in trying to put my own work in a box and doing that instead of just trying to let it be what it is intended to be and not what I'm trying to force it to be. We are not all as singular in our experiences as we think sometimes. And I think that that is a really connecting thought to have, that you can be surprised at just how many people feel the exact same way as you do, even if it is something as absurd as the placement of Q in the alphabet. As long as I have lived, I've wondered, am I a plant or simply a vessel? Is this plant an extension of me, or are we separate entities entirely? I have no memory without this plant coming from the top of my head. Or is it really coming from the top of my head? Is this my mind, or merely a representation of one's thoughts? Amy, that air plant over there, she's stuck there. Someone glued her to this orb to keep her there forever. Have I suffered the same fate, bound by this cement? Or am I only alive because a plant breathed life into me?